I'm the training manager here at MDeverywhere. MDeverywhere is a full-service revenue cycle management company providing purpose-built, cloud-based revenue cycle management and EMR technology combined with expert back-end billing services. Our mission is to maximize collections and revenue for our clients. We also have a top-notch credentialing team and are an NCQA certified credential verification organization prepared to handle all of your credentialing and enrollment needs. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Our topic today is ICD-10, Q4 goals, and Q1 2014 planning. Our guest speaker is Lisa Asbell. She's the president of TrainRx. Lisa Asbell is a registered nurse for almost 2 decades. She's a certified identity theft risk management specialist and an ICD-10 transition specialist. Lisa is the only ICD-10 speaker in the U.S. that is a member of the prestigious National Speakers Association. She has spoken over 1,000 times in over 500 cities across the U.S. She's trained more than 50,000 healthcare professionals in live seminars, recorded audios, and webinars. Lisa has also published over 30 articles in various healthcare-related publications and written programs and policies to help private practices comply with legislation like OSHA, HIPAA, identity theft, and now ICD-10. We are pleased to have her presenting on behalf of MDeverywhere today. Before I turn it over to Lisa, let's cover just a couple of housekeeping points. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all of you via email. We will also be sending a copy of Lisa's PowerPoint presentation to all of you as well. We have allowed some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you have a question, just type it into the questions chat window on your control panel as you think of them, and we'll answer as many of those as we can during the presentation at the end. Any that we don't have time for live will be followed up with individually. So without any further delay, I'll hand the mic over to Lisa Asbell, ICD-10 training specialist, for her presentation on what to do and when to do it.
Hi, Leonard. Thanks. Can you hear me? Am I nice and clear?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Leonard, for that wonderful introduction. Maybe I should have you travel all over the country and introduce me. It sounds like I paid you, so I'm thinking, who is he introducing? I'm impressed with all that. So anyway, I'm so excited to share with you guys, and I know that many of you on this webinar have either heard me speak in person or maybe met me somewhere out in the U.S. as I've traveled and been speaking for years on various topics in healthcare. And I'm excited to share this information with ICD-10. And if you've attended an earlier seminar, this is going to be just a little bit different. I know last week we were maxed out, and some of you guys couldn't get on, so I'm so glad you came back today. You know, there's so much changes, so many changes in healthcare right now. It really, you know, you can look at it as it's a great time to be in healthcare because there's chance for a lot of growth and learning and knowledge increase. And then you can also look at it as a devastating time to be in healthcare because it's overwhelming. And I want to start out saying that, you know, I started my own company, TrainRx.net, a few years ago and started consulting in private practice. And I was just blown away by what I saw as far as practice managers and them being overwhelmed. And then recently have partnered with a very great firm out of Baltimore, the Baltimore area, that really does ICD-10 in hospitals, and they have their own past performance and awesome Dun & Bradstreet about what they've done in healthcare. But whether you're a hospital, a CFO, a CEO, or a practice manager, you know, this information is really the same. It doesn't matter. We all have to go through the same process as for ICD-10 to get paid on October 1st, 2014. It just, you know, yours is just a bigger scale if you're in a larger organization. And I want to start the webinar today by saying, you know, all these recent studies that are coming out that only 5% of private practices are really doing anything with ICD-10 and only about 25% of hospitals. So I know there's huge need out there, and I'm going to tell you guys something. If you are behind in the process of where you need to be, you cannot do this alone. You have to go to your decision makers, whether it's on a small scale of buying, a turnkey solution at a private practice for $500 or $600, or all the way up to bringing in a project manager that might cost you a couple $100,000. You guys have to realize that you're going to need help with this. There's so many integrated systems here with meaningful use to looming and all of the other changes. I mean, you're going to need some outside help. It really is almost impossible for you to think you can go this alone. But let's get started. The purpose of today's webinar is really to talk about where you should be and how I can help you really catch up if you're behind. And you guys really need a wake-up call, and you know that, which is why you're on this webinar, because you know there are things that you're missing. I'm going to give you some awareness about ICD-10. We're going to talk about the impact on your operations, and then, of course, we're going to talk about what the fourth quarter goals are and how you can hurry up and really try to get where you need to be before we get into quarter one of 2014. CMS is saying now there are no postponements, that this is it. ICD-10 will go forward, and every provider, insurance company, payer, clearinghouse, every entity covered under HIPAA will have to move forward on October 1st, 2014 as the go-live date. I have to point out on here that the American Hospital Association supports ICD-10, and the reason they do, guys, is because hospitals have spent millions and millions of dollars with ICD-10, and I know private practice is still lagging behind, and the American Medical Association are throwing in, their 2 cents about can we delay it or postpone it, but, it's a resounding now. We're only 11 months away and a few days, and it is moving forward. So if you're getting that from your providers or people in your organization, I'm dealing with a large organization right now, and their CFO is still saying, let's put this off, and they have hundreds and hundreds of providers and dozens of locations, and it really will spell disaster. So it's going to happen, and we need to move forward with that. There are some benefits to ICD-10, and I'm always happy to share this, and this is what I like to talk to providers about. So whether you're a hospital and you need to kind of engage your providers and get them on board, or you're in private practice and you need to kind of get your docs and providers moving in the right direction, there are benefits to ICD-10. I mean, when we look at how we can have better communication and we're using the correct terminology, ICD-9, guys, is like driving a 30-year-old car. It is outdated. The terminology is outdated. Many of the categories are filled. ICD-10 really brings us up into the 21st century. As you guys may or may not know, all the other countries, 151 other countries in the world are already on ICD-10 and have been for years. It's embarrassing for the U.S. to actually still be using ICD-9. Where it comes in, as I say, to help an organization, whether you're a hospital or provider, is that you're going to get paid faster. Once we work out these kinks and once we figure out the coding and we make sure, that's why it's so imperative for you guys. You're already behind the curve probably because you're supposed to start testing in October of this year. So my goal is if I can get everybody where they need to be and start testing in January or February, and you have a good 8 or 9 months to test, then you'll work out those kinks. And if you do, that should mean faster reimbursement, because ICD-10 is all about greater specificity and better documentation. What's going to happen is many times where you get denials or pending claims because they want to see your notes, these diagnosis codes in ICD-10 are so specific, you're not going to have that. So you are actually going to get paid quicker. When we talk about performance measurement reporting and some of those things, collecting better health data, learning more about the underlying causes of diseases. If the more information we get from a patient and the more that we can document it and code it so that it is tracked in our system, the better providers of healthcare we can be. And I think, I always say people aren't in healthcare for the money, they're in it because they love people. So those are just some of the benefits, guys, of ICD-10, and it is a great time in healthcare, especially if you are a revenue cycle person and you can start looking at, the payers and how long it takes you to get paid and the claims you have problems with, and then after 2014, October 1st, you can start measuring that against to see really where there are benefits of ICD-10. And listen, we've learned this from other countries. So we've never transitioned in the U.S. We've listened to what 100 other countries have to say about faster reimbursement. So this is what we're learning from other people. So it is not all bad news with ICD-10. Here are some of the major differences, and I know you guys have seen these things before, but the bottom line is we're going in outpatient, we're going from 13,000 to 69,000. If you combine that with inpatient, currently for PCS or inpatient, there's about 3,000, I think, and they're going to about 70,000. So some providers will need to know certainly what they write every day in their top diagnosis for PCS maybe and for ICD-10-CM. But one of the things we don't want to do is overwhelm these providers because they don't really need to know all 140,000 codes. They don't know all 13,000 now. They just need to focus on the ones that they use over and over and over, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But basically, the new book will have 21 chapters. Now we go from 3 to 7 characters. Guys, it is all about greater documentation and greater specificity, telling the left from the right, really getting very detailed on a cut or a break, how it happened, what the scenario was. It's basically telling a story, and that really is why there's so many more codes, because there's so many more areas of greater specificity. What you need to focus on, let me tell you, you need to focus on your most frequently used ICD-9 codes. If you should go into your EMR and you should pull the last couple of years, your top 100 diagnosis codes that you use over and over for every provider. And then you should use a system like GEMS to convert those codes and see what they would look like in ICD-10. And again, this is not for coding, this is just for education purposes. But you need to convert those codes and look to see what they would be in ICD-10. And by doing that, you could make your providers cheat sheets or tip sheets and say, this is what 9 is, this is what 10 is going to be, and these are the documentation elements that you're going to need included. Listen, if you started doing that today for your providers, all of your providers, and listen, if you're at a big hospital organization, one of the things that we do is we provide those tip sheets. And that is, I mean, that's almost like a salvation to your community physicians or your hospitalists, because it helps them get accustomed to the documentation improvements and some of the things they need to know. But even in private practice, that's what you should do. Convert those codes, do a chart audit. Just do it internally. Start pulling some charts with those codes and looking to see how your providers are doing, and then letting them know how they're doing by showing them what they're missing and why it would fail for ICD-10. Let's talk about actually preparing for ICD-10. This is the AHIMA timeline. And, the CMS timeline is a little bit more detailed, but the reason I decided to use the AHIMA timeline for this presentation is because I wanted you guys to see that in phase 1 for large organizations like 30-plus provider practices or private practices, and then, of course, anything from a critical access hospital all the way up to multi-system hospitals. Really, this should have started in 2011, and many systems did, and when the initial delay came last year, they kept going. And that's why those systems are right where they need to be. And I cannot stress enough that most of you guys are probably 2 years behind. Right now, if you were looking at the CMS timeline, it would say that you should be doing internal testing. Many of you guys don't have a project manager. You don't even know. I'm dealing with a large organization now that the CFO thinks that the CIO should handle it. The CMIO is saying, how should I be involved? And I mean, it's just a discombobulated mess, guys, and it spells disaster for healthcare in general if we don't get where we need to be. So how do we get you and make up for this lost time so that you can, over the next 60 to 90 days, do makeup and get to where you need to be the first of the year? Let's talk about what that implementation effort looks like. First, organizing your implementation effort, and I'll just kind of go through these on the screen because these are very valuable for you in the long run. Getting a communication plan together, that impact analysis is, I mean, you've got to do it. You've got to know where you're starting and how much it's going to cost. Contacting your vendors, putting a budget together. Then we'll talk about training, analyzing the business processes, and then we'll talk about testing. So we're going to go through some of these. And the first 5 really are how we're going to catch you up to where you need to be. So for the 4th quarter plan for 2013, we're going to talk about where you should be, of course, and what you should be doing to catch up. And we'll talk about some of the obstacles. First is finding somebody that can be in charge, finding a project manager. I like this graphic here. This woman is obviously in charge, and everybody's looking to her, and I love that. So, whether you're a huge hospital organization or a small private practice, somebody has to step up to the plate and say, I'll be the project manager, I'm going to be in charge of this, right? And then that person's job is to find a few other people who will do the same thing. Guys, if you're not doing this or you haven't already done this step, you're 2 years behind. So this needs to be something decided immediately. Then, and part of that is, their job is to examine some of the resources and that you have internally. Who would I put on, who am I going to make the project manager, or who maybe can I ask, get to be a part of the team? For instance, let's say you're a 3 or 4 provider practice and you've got 15 employees that are staff members. You want one person from the front office. You might want one person from the coding or billing department. You might want one person from, the clinical side, a nurse like me. You've got to think about who you have in your organization, and it's different for everybody. I know that when I put our program together to help small private practices, I wanted them to be able to look at something, check it off, and move on to the next thing. So, sometimes that's where just going to your providers or your leadership in your organization and saying, we need outside resources. I can't just download some of these free guides online and decipher this information. So, all of those are internal resources that you have. I mean, your best resource is going to be spending a few $100s to get something that's turnkey that will help you. Then, when you're talking about everything ICD-9, everything there, every place in your organization there's an ICD-9 code, there's an impact with ICD-10. I am so sick and tired of hearing my EMR company or my vendors are going to handle this for me. Guys, they are not going to handle it for you. Even with, whether it's education or training or referrals or, thinking about the forms in your office, your super bill, your order entry, everything is affected if it has an ICD-9 code on it. You do not have vendors that are going to handle all of those things. So this is really a wake-up call for you to realize all the areas that ICD-9 actually touches. There's an impact with ICD-10, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then getting a communication plan. This is key. I tell you, working in corporate America, one of the most shocking things, and I've found it in healthcare, is there's no real communication. There's no real communication between departments. I've worked now with enough hospitals and larger organizations with ICD-10 to know that in many organizations, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. Guys, you need a steering committee. You need somebody from each department. You need to be having weekly meetings and lining out what are your tasks, what are you doing this week, what are your goals for the month. I mean, this is such an invasive thing. You better get out of your brain that this is all about coding and that it's all my vendors are going to handle it or it's going to be delayed. You better start communicating internally with your organization. If you cannot communicate internally and get everybody on the same page, how in the world are you going to communicate externally with your vendors and the hospitals and all the people that you need to communicate with to make sure that your organization doesn't fail? This is bigger. Y2K went off pretty smoothly, but what you don't understand unless you're an IT person, I was talking to one this morning and I thought it was brilliant. And Joe Lizelle with a HIMSS organization in Alabama, and Joe was saying, these people don't understand what went into Y2K. All we know is that our lights stayed on. You guys, if you weren't in IT, you don't know the time and the energy and the billions of dollars that went in, and it all came down to people being able to communicate. So if you're in a small practice, I know in our program, we put forms in there so that if you assign Jenny the task of helping you with the impact assessment, she's got an impact assessment right there. And you can actually make her, give her an actual original form that she signed to bring to be a part of the team and the task you've given her. So you can hold her accountable. That is a very simple way to communicate in a private practice. But if you're in a bigger organization, you've got to establish a good communication plan. You've got to track the progress. You've got to document where everybody is. You can't just have Sally, yelling down the hall, hey, I did get in touch with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they're not going to be ready to test until March. That doesn't work. You've got to be able to document it somehow. And most private practices don't have that capability unless they go to an outside resource. I want to talk a little bit about this slide with ICD-10 changing everything. This is the real wake-up call for most of you guys, that your providers go, oh, we'll send the coders to a class, or, call Jake in IT and make sure that he's ready, or that he's doing what he's supposed to do. Guys, it's invasive. And let me say this too. if you're not sure where your current staff is with billing and coding, and you're not measuring them, ICD-10 is going to blow them out of the water. Let me just tell you that. This is the best time ever. If you have ever thought about outsourcing your billing, this is the best time ever to consider that, because a billing or a revenue cycle management company like MDeverywhere will take away some of the burden from you where this is concerned. So, you know, if you were thinking about doing it 2 years from now, you better think about it today, because the fact that ICD-10 will impact everything, and you have to do it. This is not let's pass the buck and hope somebody else does it. Guys, they say 10 to 15% of private practices, and all these studies, and I say they, but I don't care if it's Qualitas or if it's the RAND organization, they've all said it, that 10 to 15% of private practices are going to fail because of ICD-10. And it's only because we are notorious in healthcare, and I've been in RN for almost 20 years, and I know this for a fact, and I'm not picking on anybody, but we're notorious in healthcare for putting it off and passing the buck and let that department do it. No, this is all hands on deck. It's going to impact everything. So if you're thinking about using your vendors, when I interviewed on our radio show, Healthcare Hotties radio show, and you can find that at healthcarehotties.net, by the way, I interviewed Stanley Knockinson, and I would consider myself one of the #1 speakers on ICD-10 in the country, and he's the #1 content expert, hands down, on ICD-10 in the country right now. And Stanley says, you know, people do not get this. They do not realize all of these areas that it impacts. They don't realize all these systems that need to integrate. And even just the information, or, you know, the informatics people and the people that really do know IT, they can't handle all those other departments that need to be changed. So I want to talk about, you know, some of these areas so you guys can see that. Well, let me back up, because I don't like the way that skips. So let's talk about this. The physicians will be affected, obviously, because I talked about documentation and specificity. Nurses, every form needs to be revised or recreated. Documentation, again, the nurses document as well. Prior authorizations, when you're, you know, setting up surgeries or you're getting pre-certs, prior authorizations, all of those things are going to be impacted. Let's talk about lab, documentation, reporting, billing, policies, procedures, training, coding, the code sets, the clinical knowledge, concurrent use. Let's talk about front desk, HIPAA, your systems there, managers, new policies, new procedures, vendors, payers, contractors. Listen, this is the optimal time for you to decide. You know, everybody always thinks, and I talk to providers every day. I was just on the phone, almost late getting on the webinar because I was talking to a provider. And providers tend to think that if they use outsourced outside vendors, that they give up control. But let me clear that up for you. This is a time in healthcare when more than ever you're going to need to establish some relationships with vendors, because you're not giving up control. Those people, I know, like MDeverywhere, actually gives you total control. It's like a billing department, but they're just not down the hallway, they're down the street. So I want you to understand that these vendors, and I'm not just saying this because I am a vendor, I'm telling you, if you want to be about the business of medicine and you want to stay afloat in this economy and these changes in healthcare, you better think about outsourcing many things and making these vendors your friend, because they, in the end, are going to help you make more money and increase your revenue. So when you're thinking about an impact analysis, every organization has to do this. And, you know, when you're in a large organization, it's a very detailed thing, right? I mean, you know, there's all kinds of systems to run, and, you know, you're talking about 20 to 30,000 for a medium or a small hospital to have a real impact assessment. I know in our program for private practice, we detailed it out on 2 sheets of paper where you can really go from the front to the back of your practice and just address all the areas in the box I just showed you. How are the clinical staff? Who's affected? Let me list their names. Is that a work process impact? Is there a financial impact? We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that's how you do that. If you don't do this impact assessment and look at all those areas of your practice that are impacted, that's how you're going to get to the budget. So that's really one of the first steps you do. Here is one. Ours is very similar to this in our workbook, but here's an example of it. So we also added financial to this because I thought it was important for you to be able to see how much money that looks like to you. But that's an example. Here is an organization project kind of template from the American Medical Association that they give you. Ours is very similar to this too. The difference is it is actually written in step 1, step 2, 9 months out, 6 months out, 12 months out, which kind of helps the busy project manager or the busy office manager do a better job, and it's less work for her. But anyway, these are just some examples of templates. Let's talk about if you've got your project manager, you've got a little plan together, you put yourself together a little booklet or you bought one, and now you know what you're doing as far as what ICD-10 looks like. You've done that impact assessment. You've had either an official one if you're a large organization, or if you're small an organization, you've used these little templates and you've gone through and you've done that. One of the things, or one of the tasks that you're going to need to assign to a team member, if you can, if you're private practice by yourself in a solo practice, then a lot of the stuff will fall on you unless you outsource it to somebody else to help you with it. Ultimately, these are some of the questions you need to ask these vendors. You're going to need to call your practice management software, any software you have, any vendor that has anything to do with getting paid or ICD-9, you're going to need to ask them some of these questions. And there's actually more questions than this. I think there's about a total of 17, but you know, you need a form for that. You need a system. You need to assign somebody to contact these vendors and ask them, when are you going to be ready to start testing? Are there any upgrades to my system? Are the costs covered in my contract? When will you have the new tools in place? Are you going to help me train? How long will you do parallel or dual coding? When can we test the software? What are you going to do in the event your system fails? I mean, guys, do you realize that this Joe Lavelle that I was just talking to today, with him, you know, he was saying to me that probably 50% of the smaller EMR vendors are going out of business because of ICD-10, because they don't have the capabilities. If you went with a free EMR, or if you went with a smaller company, you're in big trouble. And if you're not already contacting, and I know some hospital systems that went with some smaller vendors as far as their EMR, guys, you have to get on the phone and get answers from these people. I mean, it is imperative. Again, you know, let me talk about an obstacle with some of this stuff. Contacting your vendors and your payers is one of the obstacles with that. It's getting them to call you back, getting them to give you an answer, keeping up with it. The bigger your organization, of course, the more vendors you have. So that really is challenging. This next slide talks about doing an estimate budget, and we have lots of examples of what that budget looks like. But basically, a lot of it is in productivity. Most of the budget typically is in productivity. Now, this is for anywhere from a 1 to a 10 provider practice. Now, I believe that if we looked at what MGMA says and some of the other organizations, Stanley Nachemson, who, again, is the #1 content expert on ICD-10, and he's part of our team, I'm so excited, in the U.S., this is how he actually broke it down. And you see that a lot of that increased documentation, but it's really the process in time. Cash flow disruption 20,000. So here's the thing. On every webinar or seminar I do, there are always providers that go, are you kidding me? Guys, this is just before. This is over the next 11 months. This is not a drop in the bucket if you don't get on board and start getting all these things done now before January or by the end of January. There's no telling what it's going to cost you long term. That's why you can't afford to wait another day. Get some outside resources. And if you have to spend a few $100s, do it. Your time is valuable, and it's worth having somebody do half the work for you as far as the timeline and laying it out. This is just another example. This is from the American Medical Association. I'll give you guys an example of, you know, a 200-bed hospital may cost $2 million. A 50-bed hospital may cost $500,000. So when you're talking about hospital systems, you know, you're talking about much bigger numbers. But basically, the AMA says maybe about $9,300 per doctor. So I like that number. I think that's a good number to work with. This is another one from MGMA. You notice they say $28,000 per doctor. So guys, think about this. This is for a 3-doctor practice, they say, and it's very similar to Stanley's. But so you see, here's the thing. Even the budget things are all over the place, but they all give the same breakdown. So in your practice, you could take this and go to your provider if you have 3 doctors and say, look, we're looking at about $80,000 here. You know, could you come in under 20, you know, 20,000 less? Yes. Could maybe it be 20,000 more? Maybe. But this at least gives you something to work with. All right, so finishing up on really this 4th quarter, get your project team together, get your project manager together, make sure that you've gotten some outside pushes, some outside resources, even if it's something like our guide that's a few $100 that will help you. But make sure that you've got, you're thinking about the budget, that you've done an impact assessment, that you've gone to your leadership and your providers and said, this is what's going to cost, this is how much we need to budget for each month for the next 11 months. And that's where you should be. Really, ideally, you should have already been there probably in June this year, but we're playing catch up, and we know that. So we'd like to see you. I know with our clients, we're coaching them on monthly coaching calls to get there by the end of January so they can start the testing process. So let's talk about, once you've got your project in place, you've done your impact assessment, you've started contacting your vendors and your payers, let's talk about moving forward. This is where you're actually going to do some of these more technical steps. Now remember, you've already done this play conversion of your top diagnosis code to try to educate your doctors and your providers on the documentation and specificity. Now we're going to really get down to the crosswalking situation between 9 and 10. We're going to be talking to our vendors to see who have those capabilities, and we're going to talk to them specifically about the code set and what we need to know as far as ICD-10. Then we're going to start thinking about in January, you can already think about it now, but you're going to actually really need to be ready to do it probably by February or March, and we're going to talk about training. This is the most important thing I'm going to say on the webinar today, guys. If you do not know where your current coders and billers, where their accuracy is, their speed, if you don't know where your #1 denied claims are, what the problems are with those #1 denied claims that you get, or pending claims or issues, how fast your providers, if they code, how good and accurate they are, how good their documentation is. If you don't know all of that stuff, come January 1, you really are going to be in big trouble. It is so important for you to devise a way now, and I know that we help our clients do that, to track that stuff, because you won't know where the deficiencies are after October 1st. So let's find out where everybody is, and I'll do it one more time for MDeverywhere. I mean, this is where outsourcing the billing part can really take some heat off of you. I know they've devised a sandbox that you can get in and play around, and I think they're going to announce that or kind of unveil that over the next few weeks. But they've got some resources that would help you if you're their client, that would really help you. But we need to think about developing that training plan. And again, you can think about it now, but you don't really need to do it until, I call it spring training, okay? So are you going to train your coders through webinars, through videos? You're going to send them to a boot camp. What about your providers? You know, is the hospital going to train your providers on clinical documentation improvements for CM, which is outpatient, or are they just going to train inpatient? I mean, some of those are things that you need to think about when you're developing your training plan. Let me say this. One of the other things I've got to point out is you need to think about staffing as well, around from September on to the end of the year. You know, certified coders are going to be in high demand. As a matter of fact, there's probably about a 70% shortage. So if you've got good coders, you better do what you can do to retain them. You might need to go out and up your staffing. For some of you guys, I might be able to have some resources for that for you. But you really need to think about that. You need to think about no vacation time. During that time, you're going to need everybody available. Let's talk about analyzing the payer processes. Now, this is, again, one of those other, you're contacting the payers now, right? But you're actually doing the more technical system integration as we move forward to January, right? Because that's when you need to start thinking about testing. Yes, you really should have been testing starting last month, but very few people are doing that, so we have to work with what we're dealt with. So you need to think about in dialogue, again, that's where communication is key. Some small payers may not even make the transition, but you need to be getting questions answered from payers. You know, when they're going to be ready to test, what part of the process that applies to you that's so important for you to do as far as analyzing those payers' processes. All right, let's think about this. This is one of the other things when it comes to your health plans, when they're changing their policies, when they're changing their reimbursement. All of those things are going to come down at one time. The impact of payment, how long, you are going to have to do dual coding because workers' comp and disability and auto insurance don't have to make the transition to ICD-10. So, those, again, these are things that the first quarter you need to already have an idea of, but you need to really make sure that all of these things are in place because all of these things are going to be changing. And you guys see on here, the good news is that some of the payers have, some information about ICD-10 now on their site. So, you need to talk to your the people that you have relationships with or your representatives from either your vendors and your payers right now, and you need to start talking about ICD-10. You need to document your conversations. You need to start asking all of those questions. I mean, really, you should do that now and then get into the more technical side in January of next year. Let's talk about more, again, with some of the coding. We'd like to see all the upgrades and all of that stuff done. I'd like to see it actually done in January, but I know that probably won't happen. So if we could get it done by March 31st, and then we could have, a good 5 months worth of running testing. Between January and March, you can certainly do internal testing to your own systems internally. But this gives you a question, just a kind of a guideline, and all you guys will have access to this PowerPoint as well, of things that the vendors should do. Again, this is talking about the testing of codes and, just questions. What does your project management system transmit, or does it transmit ICD-10 codes? When are you going to find out about that? What about your clearinghouse? Have you talked to them? Is your coding translated to incentive programs for PCRS or EHR? Does the process from documentation to billing work? I mean, guys, overall, you're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 systems that need to integrate and work here. So we cannot test and think that that's even possible. It's going to work out in our favor if we don't do it sooner than later. So it's so important. Let's talk about a little bit about after October 1st, 2014. So I said, the first 90 days, let's get a project manager. Let's put our team together. Let's start having weekly meetings. I don't care what size organization you are, if this is on a bigger scale. Let's start making sure that every department has their tasks and that they're assigned and we can hold them accountable, and we're checking on that. Let's make sure we have a real and a realistic impact assessment or risk assessment so that we really know the cost. Let's talk to our providers. Let's convert those codes and document, and so we can show them what, as far as documentation, what they need to know and what the new ICD-10 codes would look like by giving them cheat sheets, which will be helpful. Then let's put together that budget and present it so that we at least have an idea of how much this is going to cost. And then in January, that first quarter, we're going to think about making sure that our communication with our payers and our vendors, and we can start that testing process, ask those questions, make sure they're where they need to be, maybe replacing some vendors if we have to, if we can't get good answers, or if we find out or we hear through the grapevine they might, go out of business or sunset. All of those are things to consider. And then we need 6 to 8 months of testing. We really need a year, but we don't have that because everybody's behind. So in the second best possible scenario, we're testing, let's say, for 6 to 8 months and doing external testing for that period, which would be great. Then let's talk about after October 1st, 2014. What ends up happening after that? Let me just tell you, number one, I said here, make sure that your staff, you think about that now. You need to think about that, 10 months in advance versus 2 weeks in advance, because there won't be anybody left. Making sure you have credit lines. Guys, Bank of America, SunTrust, Fifth Third Bank have all set up divisions for ICD-10. They've all set up divisions for lines of credit for private practice and hospitals because they say you might need as much, and they is CMS, and that comes from other countries who had issues with reimbursement and rejections when they converted to ICD-10 because people's systems weren't ready, whether it's the payer side, the provider side, the hospital side, it doesn't really matter. If they weren't ready and it doesn't process, maybe the clearinghouse, it doesn't matter. If it's not ready, it's not going to process, you're not going to get paid, you need money in the bank. So CMS says you might need as much as 6 months. One thing about outsourcing to a billing company, if you decide to do that, like with a company like MDeverywhere, you'd probably cut that in half, and you might need only 3 months of cash. We tell our clients that you might need anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So you need to talk about those things unless your providers are on a bankroll and they got a lot of money in the bank. This is something to address. Monitor compliance activities. We have to be thinking about fraud and abuse and RAC audits and, the coder that's been working for the provider for 20 years that knows what he meant to document, so she picks the correct code, but the documentation that there to support it, that's going to spell trouble. And I say, I hope you guys look good in black and white stripes or orange, because if you're not careful and you do those things, and you wouldn't intentionally do it, it would be an honest mistake for most people, but you'll go to jail nonetheless, and you'll be having to refund money, you'll be in all types of fines. So you need to think about those things, and you need to have a way, again, to monitor, even if you're a small organization. I'm shocked at these small organizations that don't have a way to monitor this stuff. But you need to monitor it now so you'll know if there are changes. Charting your vendors and your payers and looking who's the slowest payer. And listen, even your providers, if they do their own coding, again, that comes back to testing your coders. See how accurate they are now, what your problems are now, because then you can compare those with what happens in ICD-10 after October 1st, 2014. If you don't track now, you can't track then. So that's kind of a snapshot of what to look for after October 1st, 2014. These are some of the other considerations where it just costs us money, and that is the bottom line with this. Maybe you go to more electronic tools for computer-assisted coding. Again, maybe you have some other type of system out there that would help you with that. You don't want to convert your super bills too early, because things can change. I mean, the ICD-10 codes out there now are not 100%. They're only 99% accurate. So that's why I was saying, when you start converting those your top diagnosis for your providers, just to kind of help them engage and buy in and see what it looks like, that just will help you. That's not set in stone. It's just really for education purposes. And then, I love this last statement here. Consider a hybrid technology and service partner as an option over traditional vendor offerings. We are in a time, again, and I started the webinar today off with this, if you can look at it like this is the worst time in healthcare, or you can look at it like it's the best time in healthcare. I'm a person, I wake up every day and I think it's going to be a great day. And whatever challenges come my way, I'm going to find a way to overcome it. And I would like to say that my other compadres in healthcare feel that way, but I know it's overwhelming to you guys. And whether you're at a private practice, whether you're a provider on the call, or a biller, or a coder, or a CFO at a hospital, this is a major overhaul. But let me tell you something, and this is especially true for private practice. Shame on you if you don't consider outsourcing some of the stuff to make your team better and brighter. It doesn't take anything away from the coders. It doesn't take anything away from the practice manager. It doesn't take anything away from you. It actually adds, because those people can do what the areas of expertise that they have and do a better job if you'll start outsourcing some of that stuff and stop looking at it as it's given up control. Start looking at it it's just the best option for the changes in healthcare. And I can't stress enough how, of all the billing companies that I've worked with and everybody that's reached out to me to do seminars and teach and train for them, MDeverywhere has the best system, the best integration, the best knowledge. I mean, they're certainly great, and they are a hybrid technology. So there's certainly vendors out there that can take the headache. And, don't always be going into everything where somebody's just trying to sell me something. You need to open up to realize how much of my hour of my time worth. The average practice manager out there, an hour of your time is worth $100, or more, maybe even $1,000. And if you can buy a turnkey program that would help you, that's the smart thing to do. Or you can outsource, to another vendor, and it can help you, free you up. I guarantee you'll bring more money into your facility. I'd like to throw that out there. And if you guys actually decrease in revenue and you outsource, I'd really like to hear about it. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I appreciate you guys today being on the webinar. And boy, I know I talked fast. I was really hyped up today, and I know I gave you a lot of information. The great thing about this is you can have the link and you can go back and listen to this again, and maybe you can slow me down and put me into Charlie Brown parents womp, womp, womp. So you can really grasp everything. The next couple slides really are just some resources for you guys. and it's kind of hard for you to have to type all that stuff in. I'm sorry. We do have a lot of those resources on our site at trainrx.net, and they're already linked. So if you'll go there, it'll be much easier for you than having to copy and paste, and that's trainrx.net. And here's some more education sites that will give you more information. Again, they're all on our website as well. Let's see. Here's some hospital resources. Again, they're on our website at trainrx.net. So let's talk about it. Time to start yesterday. We need to really start converting those codes so we get our physicians to buy in. We need to realize that physicians are way far behind. And the easiest way to get your provider to get his head out of the sand is start showing them the codes. And listen, when you're talking to your providers, they don't care about the labor pain. You got to show them the baby, right? So I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 20 years. I've learned that. They want to know, how much is it going to cost me? What do I need to know? Put it down in bullet points and show it to me. And that's exactly, if you're going to be in charge of this project, I don't care if it's the CEO that you're talking to in a hospital or all these providers at private practice, this is the way you talk to them. You know, think about your physicians needing to be trained. There's a lot of anatomy and physiology or anatomy and terminology. I know we have a module for that for our members, which is great. But, you know, some of those things are things I didn't talk about that are part of this greater specificity, greater documentation. It all does go hand in hand, guys, for sure. Then you may need outside help, and you may need to start outsourcing, whether it's your billing or other vendors. You may need to think about that. There's more resources. Again, I think this is twice for the American Hospital Association. Am I going back? Oh, I'm going backwards. I'm sorry, guys. That's the first mistake I've ever made in 29 years. Okay, so my friend Leonard, if you're there, I'm going to turn it back over to you because I know that we have questions, and I'll be glad to answer as many as we can in the next few minutes. Thank you guys so much for your time today.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you so much for laying out the game plan for the next 6 months. For everyone attending, please feel free to contact Lisa directly through her website at www.trainrx.net or by email at lisa@lisabell.com for any follow-up. We do have some questions, as you mentioned. First of all, let's start with the question is, do you offer classes for billers to get ICD training for coding and billing, and do you offer classes for physicians?
Well, let me answer that. We will, with people that have a member of our program, and the MDeverywhere price, as you guys can see on the screen, is half price, but that includes your guide, and we will do coding videos. We will have some clinical documentation. We are trying to be the one resource for everything for that small amount of money. So, you know, weekly emails, calls, videos. So, yes, we will have some training. Do we offer certified coding training? No, we don't. We will be giving you some generic training videos. And, of course, at that price point, we could never do any type of real certified coding training for specialties. We're just going to give you the nuts and bolts of what you need to know, along with all that other stuff that comes with our program. But there are, of course, there are plenty of other classes out there that you guys, and some of them are very expensive. So just shop around because there are other resources.
Great. Another question. You mentioned that we will need to change MPPs and have patients sign. What changes will be needed to meet ICD-10?
And have patients sign?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Oh, you mean policies and procedures?
Correct.
Well, I'll just give you an example in our program. Like we just say in our program, it just basically have a document that says, you know, we've gone with the ICD-10, the TrainRx system, and this is our guide, and this is going to be how we're going to make these changes. When I'm the patient signing, I don't know where that came from. I don't remember saying that, but if you heard that I don't think a patient needs to sign anything. More, I know we have that with our program, just that it's an internal thing. We're adopting this program. This is how we're going to manage our project, you know, by the office manager doing it. But in hospitals and large organizations, you know, there's going to be numerous amount of policies that change, whether it's your payer contracts, your vendor contracts. I mean, there's lots of policies and procedures that will need to change, and that's all internal, and that varies from organization to organization. But no, I don't think patients have to sign anything.
Another question, is there a book for this, or is there a resource available providing the step-by-step guide?
That's exactly what our program does, and guys, I don't feel comfortable doing a sales spill. but that's exactly what our program does. It has forms. It takes that practice manager and takes 1,000 hours off of her head and basically tells her step by step what to do. And as of November 1st, that price will be $749 because we can't have all those, you know, we have so many resources going into you. We're really partnering with you to try to help you, and that's unlimited consulting too via email. So, you know, we do that. That step-by-step guide, as far as I know, is the only one in the country.
Okay, perfect. Next question. Will the HCFA form remain the same for ICD-10 as it is for ICD-9?
No, there will be changes to that as well.
Next question. This is an interesting one. How bad will this affect CPT coding? Will the workbook change as well?
Well, no, that's a great question. It won't affect CPT codes at all, and so the CPT codes will be the same. Only the ICD-9 codes will change and convert to ICD-10. I will say, guys, that, you know, as we move away from diagnosis-based reimbursement and go to more or procedure-based reimbursement and go to more to diagnosis-based reimbursement, as we move away from that, CPT codes will eventually disappear. I mean, you know, they're going to loop everything in a group, and this is what you get, and this is the diagnosis code. So it may eventually disappear, but for now, don't worry about that at all. It won't be affected.
Okay, perfect. When should we start coding training?
I always say it's spring training. I don't think you want to train your people too early. I would concentrate on testing them now and looking at their deficiencies and seeing what you need to do and thinking about staffing, and then move toward more of like March or April to think about actually training them. But I'd have a plan in place. I'd secure a vendor for that. You know, like I said, we, with this 349 program, will have some coding, some generic coding videos, but you know, I would think that the official CPC type coding training you should probably be fine if you do in March or April, and then they have a good 6 months to practice.
I have just someone verifying for the pricing of the package. They said, did you say this price $349 goes to $749 November 1st? It
does. And let me just say that, guys, it is $749. That's how much it is. We just, for people that listen to the MDeverywhere webinar, we just let you buy it this process. This is a special link for you. It's $749 now on our website. So that is the price. I'm just giving you guys an opportunity to get it at this price for MDeverywhere.
Someone offered, does your package offer mock-up charts or situations that staff could run through for hands-on training and testing?
No, but we have some videos that we'll share that will help you with that.
Right. I think we have time for one more question. Where can I find a list of ICD-10 codes?
Okay. There, and this is great, and I always say on every webinar, I don't know why I don't have it, under resources at our website at trainerx.net, and you can Google this and find this. You don't have to go to our website to get it, but there are, it's called GEMS. It's the General Equivalency Mapping System, so capital GEMS, and there's lots of different GEMS tools out there. Some you can buy for $120. I know of one that if you buy it for $120, it actually does like the mapping and convert it for you. It's great. And so there's there's something like that you can buy for $100, and there's free ones too. I don't sell those, but and that will help you start converting your codes. I think AHIMA has it. I'm sure AAPC has one, but that you can just go in and put in your codes and then start converting them that way.
Great. Just so everyone knows, I've had a few questions asking about the presentation today. Quite a few people have asked if they'll be getting copies of this slideshow, and you will. We will be sending out both a recording of all of the videos that you've seen today, of the recording that you've seen today, as well as a copy of the slideshow. So you will be receiving a copy of that. MDeverywhere is doing our part to get information out and to have informative articles and videos posted on MDeverywhere's blog. So visit us often at www.mdeverywhere.com for new content. As Lisa referenced, ICD-10 preparation can be really overwhelming. Keep in mind that working with a revenue cycle partner like MDeverywhere can lighten your burden. We provide process-built, cloud-based technology and back-end services to solo or group practices, as well as hospital-based physicians. We also have a fully integrated Stage 2 certified for meaningful use EMR. We're working with our clients now to prepare them for the transition to ICD-10. Being prepared for this is not optional. Obviously, acting now will minimize the negative impact on productivity and ultimately cash flow. Anyone interested in learning more how a partnership with MDE can benefit your practice is welcome to contact us with the email address questions@MDeverywhere.com or by filling out the Contact Us form on the MDeverywhere website. There were some more questions we couldn't get to today. We will be following up on all the questions that were asked but not asked on the webinar individually. A link to the presentation will be emailed to you. We encourage you all to both review it, watch it again, and feel free to share it as well. That concludes our presentation for today. I want to again thank Lisa for all this great information, and thank you to all the attendees for spending time with MDeverywhere today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like some more information or you just have a question. I'm happy to answer it. Thank you, Leonard, so much. Thank you, MDeverywhere.
Thanks. Bye.